Hello, everyone, and welcome to PWD Allies podcast. My name is Brent Frain. I'm the host. I'm joined with Neil Matheson, my editor-producer, and I also have Dan Trace from Toronto, Ontario, joining me. Today's topic will be the ghost of Christmas past. Yes, and we're going to go way back into the time machine, way back into the vault. When did all this start?
And we are going to start with the show being a little bit of BC centric, but I did want to turn the show over at first to Dan so he can say hello and say why he is on the show today. Like, I know that you have a lot to talk about today, Dan, and I want to make sure that I give you lots of time to talk today. So I'm going to turn the show over to you for just a few moments before we kind of launch into what I wanted to get into on the show on today.
Yeah, thanks, Dan, for joining us today. It's always a great pleasure having you on the show.
Yeah, and it's always great, though, to hear what's going on across the country in different provinces, right? Because it all intertwines with each other. For myself, the big thing that's going on here in Ontario right now is these damn decisions that Doug Ford is making with regards to encampments. I don't know if you guys have heard about there. But he's now imposing, I don't know if it went through yet or not, it probably has, but now imposing $10,000 fines on encampment dwellers and also giving them up to 6 months in jail. And I can tell you just from firsthand experience of being homeless 19 years, that's just the dumbest fucking idea he's come up with yet. The fact of the matter is, just a personal quick story. About 20 years ago or so, I was facing some court fines, and I guess through my homelessness, I had forgotten about them. They didn't get me the letters because I was, flopping around from place to place. But they eventually caught up to me, and I'm not complaining about it because I owe the money, so it should be taken, right? But what happens is that if you are fined anything in the province, there's actual tax lien put on your income tax return. So, for example, if any of these homeless people are fined $10,000, and then down the road, say a couple of years from now, they make good on their life and integrate themselves back into the community and such, they're never going to get ahead because that $10,000 fine is going to be strapped to their income tax return as a lien by the province. Oh. And that's what people understand. Yeah. So his decisions on what he's doing, especially when he has nowhere to put them, this is what gets me the most. Where are these people going to go? They're going to go directly to our transit system, and it's going to be a war zone down there. I mean, if you kick people out of the only homes that they have, which are now tents, where are they going? There's no capacity left in our system, absolutely zero. So where are they supposed to go? All that's going to happen is they're going to become somebody else's problem. And that's not what we're trying to accomplish here. And this is why I get totally pissed off at all these troll-like so-called advocates that claim to be doing X, Y, and Z that are putting us 10, 20 years. And it's got to stop being treated like a business and more focused on issues and the matters at hand.
Yeah. And there's another story that you wanted to get out there, Dan, and that was there was a baby boy that died. Do you want to get into that a little bit?
Yeah, so thanks for asking about that. I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. Ironically enough, I'm trying not to laugh throughout this, but it's just a reaction. Ironically enough, this happened on Doug Ford's birthday. And it was where a young lady, 30 years old, I can't talk too much details because I think there was a publication ban put on it. But a lady, 30 years old, for whatever reason, took her 4-month-old baby and threw him down the garbage chute in my building. It was sad to me because the night before, I was actually doing a Zoom meeting like this with the board of directors I sit on for the inner city family health team, where we help the homeless and people with mental health issues. And I had ran out of beer. So I went to the store to grab a couple more beers. And on my way back, this young lady was coming on the elevator with her child. And you don't think nothing of it, right? It's just another person in your building. Hello, how are you? The long story short of it, that was about at 8:00 at night, and about 11:30 in the morning was when the police scrambled all over our place looking for this kid, and they found him in an area I'm not going to mention because, again, it's under the publication ban. I don't feel like going to jail for obstruction. But the cusp of the whole story is two things. One, get my personal part of it out of the way. Yeah. Through that whole election I just ran in, not one single interview with the media, okay? Because I was a perceived underdog, blah, blah, blah. This little child dies. I had 8 interviews in 2 days. This is a problem because the stories that are happening in the communities are not getting out. And when I hear police officers get on camera and say that this is not a public safety issue, yes, it is, motherfucker, because these people are dying in our buildings, on our streets, in our elevators, in our garbage every day of the year, whether the drug overdoses or mental health issues. And that's something that's got to be stopped. It's just unfathomable that these issues are still going on and they're not being treated as they should. Just imagine if that, because I remember that mother that night and everything was fine. The baby was fine. I was making googly faces at it. I'm not going to say what floor I live on, but they got off on their floor. I held the elevator. Away they went, right? Mm-hmm. If there was an issue, that person could have just reached out, say, for example, to like me and say, listen, I'm going through something. Make sure my kid gets the care they need or whatever. Mm-hmm. And they don't have that option because for far too long, people in public housing, people in wheelchairs, people that are suffering through mental health or addiction issues don't matter. So if we're all doing drugs on the street now, and then you're taking away the only solace they have, which is a tent, where do you think they're going to go? They're going to go to Brent's backyard. They're going to go to the transit system. They're going to go to Neil's fucking garbage room. And that's what's going to happen. Yeah. So the amount of money they're wasting on this now is going to have to be spent tenfold in the future to fix this problem once again.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There was definitely like I'm glad you were talking about homelessness too on the podcast. Just 2 days ago, Dan, we Sonia and myself taking a bus ride down Pandora. It's in Victoria. Anyone who's familiar with Pandora in Victoria, it's a lot of tent cities were going on down there. There still is a lot, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say that the city is doing a wonderful job, because really what they've done is they've now fenced off the areas that all these tents were actually in a boulevard area. So you got one road going one way, one road coming up the other way. They fenced off all the areas where all the tents were in there. Where did people go? They got dispersed around the whole city. Rather than actually fixing the problem, they didn't fix the problem because they can't find the solutions to help the people, right? They give them temporary shelters. Well, they don't have enough temporary shelters to help them. It's the resources that they need, the tools to help the individual. Now, the long story short on this is they have the Ministry of Social Development that's actually right on Pandora, right on Quadra and Pandora in Victoria. The government ministry's office that actually helps the people on income assistance, people on disability assistance. And of course, it used to be a pension, but we'll get into that later. But anyway, so we got off the bus and walked up a block, and I didn't recognize it. I'm like, where are we in the wrong area? And I thought, well, what's going on here? Did they relocate something? All I saw was fencing in front of the ministry's office. And I saw garbage everywhere, paraphernalia everywhere, tents right in front of the ministry's office. The stairs are there, and it was all fenced off in front of there. Okay, how do I get around? So I walked through the bike lane, folks. I walked through the bike lane. I couldn't walk on the sidewalk because it's fenced off. There's a fence right there. So I can't even, not even accessible. I can't even get through there. And no fault of the people that are homeless. Like the city has blocked it off. So I blame the city for not making it accessible for me to get through. So I'd walk through the bike lane, look both ways, make sure I don't get run over, because it's now I'm going to be in the fault of walking in a bike lane, right? So there's a liability issue there. So I walk up to the ministry's office to the stairs, and I smelled a stench of urine. There was feces all over the place. Now, no fault of the homeless people, because there's no washroom for them to go to. They can't go to local businesses because local businesses say, no, we can't have you coming in there. Where do they do? I mean, it's sad. It's a sad state of affair. So here's a story I'm going to share with our listeners. And it's going to be really heart-wrenching, okay? And I waited for this opportunity for today's podcast. I want people to really understand how bad the system really is. The system is designed, and this is coming from 5 homeless people that were waiting in a lineup. I went there to the ministry's office because I wanted to find out about a bus pass sticker, and we're going to be talking about a little bit about that, but I'll be doing a separate podcast next week about that. But so I wanted to find out, well, how do I get in the building? Well, the lineup was way back that way, this lady told me. And I said, okay, how long have you been here? So I've been here 1 hour and 45 minutes, and the lineup hasn't moved. Oh, what? Yeah, we're waiting outside. You have to take a number inside the building and then sit down and wait or come back out. So they were only like 3 hours behind schedule inside the building. And this was outside the building, 1 hour and 45. So folks, people that were waiting there, they were going to be lucky if they even got in that day to get into the office to ask one question. So when I got talking to them while I'm waiting there, and the stories I was told, one was a healthcare worker. She was injured on the job, no fault of her own. She had slipped and fell on the job. The floor was wet. She just turned all of a sudden and she slipped and fell. She hurt herself. She then became injured. She couldn't actually do the job fully herself. She tried. She got carpal tunnel. She got problems with her shoulder because she had fallen and she had injured her shoulder. It never healed properly. Ripple effect throughout her life. She then became disabled. She had to retire. She then became part of the systemic system that we have in place now. A number. She called it a number, not a name, a number. She says, I'm just a stat of a number. And the government just treats me as a number, not a person. She says, I don't feel like I'm not even treated as a person. I'm inhumane. And she referenced some former premiers, which we are going to get into today on the podcast.
Yeah.
And she blames every single premier that has been in power since way back when in our time vault machine that we're going to talk about today too. Every single premier could have changed things. They chose. She said the word chose not to change the regulations.
Yeah, it's a deliberate choice, right? It's a deliberate choice to do nothing.
So when I asked, what would you like to see changed? She says, I want every politician from city, provincial, federal to be at the same table. She said, nonpartisan, work together. She said, right now, all they're doing is, vote for me. I'm going to change the system. She said, look, we've been through several types of governments and nobody wants to change it, but it's all a different flavor. She called it different flavor. Yeah. And she said, nobody ever wants to change the system. She said, I just want a safe place I can call home. I want to recover. She says, I'm an addict. I'll admit I'm an addict. I said, look, I'm not judgmental. You are a human being. You are who you are. Everyone has a lived experience story to share. And I said, I do podcasts all the time. I hear a lot of different stories, and some of them are really heart-wrenching stories too. And I said, but what you're telling me, I said, it's putting a tear in my eye because it doesn't have to be this way.
When I mentioned to you guys earlier about the $10,000 fines,
yeah.
So what's going to happen? These people are also going to get into housing, right? They usually go from homelessness to housing.
Yep.
And what you have to do in housing for an RGI unit once per year is you have to give in your income tax return.
Yes.
So some of these people aren't going to file their income tax returns because they're not going to want to pay that money up.
Exactly.
Right? They're going to be evicted again. I'll put Doug Ford on blast. Now, everybody knows it's no secret that I think he's an asshole, right? But the reason why I think he's an asshole is not because I'm some crazy guy just shooting the shit. It's because back in 1999, him and his family gave me a place to live. They gave me a job. They gave me funding so I can go get clothes straight out of jail and off the streets. So if they did that to me, that tells me somewhere along the way, his ego and his pocketbook have gotten in the way of doing what's right for our province. And this is what each and every fucking political figure across the country has got to get together on. Because I saw Doug Ford the other day have a press where he met with like 15 mayors across the province or whatever. And one of those mayors I'm very disappointed in too was Mayor Dan Carter of Oshawa. And I'm disappointed because A, I know the guy, but B, he used to be homeless. So how you can back up a premier that just wants to cut down tents and basically kill people, because that's what's going to happen. People are going to die or they're going to go to jail, one of the two. So we need to get together in some kind of fucking pretense that this has got to stop. And the basic needs of people, whether you're PWD, seniors, or even newcomers, need to come from all levels of government.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I totally agree. There needs to be more collaboration of all levels of government working together rather than throwing hand grenades at each other, saying, well, my idea is better, or vote for me because the other one doesn't care. But I think that the underlying issue is there's a lot of reasons why the governments choose not to do things. It's a reprogramming of the mindset. It's the mindset of what is actually in the regulations. Who wants to push that button to change it? It's like, oh, my hands are first.
And you just hit the nail on the head there, Brent. It's about systemic discrimination, right? And again, this whole show is about exposing systemic disability discrimination and it's in plain sight. We can all see it. It's in plain sight. And then we have the politicians that are basically refusing to see it, even though they can see it. They're refusing to see it, right? And that's why we're calling today's show Ghosts of Christmas Past, because all of this systemic discrimination stems back like decades and decades, if not like 100 years. And we'll get into that.
Yeah, when I to conclude on when I was mentioning near the ministry's office, all the stories that I heard from the individuals, and it was only within a short period of time. Like, they just want housing. They want safe, affordable housing. One of them wants to live in an apartment building, but they said, the government says, oh, well, we're not going to raise your income. We can put you in subsidized housing. She goes, where is it? All I hear is talk about getting stuff built. And she says, I lived in a community where I felt welcome with my neighbors, and I want to live where I want to live. She says, just raise the rates already. And I said, well, we're going to be doing a podcast. It's called Ghosts of Christmas Past. She says, I feel like a ghost because right now that's how the government treats me. And she said, look,
I'm wearing white. I'm wearing white, so I'm a ghost today.
Yeah.
Well, that's part of the biggest problem too. I don't know if you guys have the same issue out there, but here in Ontario, at least for the past, I don't know, say 3.5 decades, people don't realize this stuff because like the media only puts out what they want, right? Let's not sugarcoat shit. They don't lie, but they only put out what they want, right? And the past few decades here in Ontario, the biggest problem I see is that on a provincial level, when we've had a Liberal government, the federal government has been PC. And on the provincial level, when we've had a PC government, the federal government has been Liberal. And far too often, unfortunately, what happens is every 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, whenever they decide to act a fool and call an election based upon their own performance, not what the public needs, far too often the opposite parties get in, and that's what's happening. And now here in Toronto, we have a mayor that is NDP affiliated. So now we have all three different parties that just aren't making the decisions that are necessary for people's everyday lives.
Yeah, and we have the same problem going out in in BC. Mass homelessness everywhere. And there's a lot of people on the streets right now that they just need the help and the proper care, right? And I'll summarize it that way because I'm not going to dive into all the reasons why they're homeless. Every individual has their own lived experience stories of what happened to them. There was one guy that was just this morning. He said he did construction all his life, and he had taken opioids, right? He's actually in a state where it numbs like all the pain that he's going through.
Yeah.
But he said the problem is that there's a huge epidemic going on, he calls it, and it's purposely done that way, where the street drugs, where it's getting intertwined into these opioids and fentanyl and all the other stuff coming in. And he says people think it's safe and it's not, and it's toxic, and then it kills them. And then they say, oh, what was the cause of death? Oh, it was their disability.
Yeah.
They classified it as their disability. No, look at the underlying problem here.
Yeah.
Look at and so when I heard this at the ministry's office, and they said, like the government knows the answer. They just don't want to do it. The lady told me the government knows how to fix this. They just don't want to. I go, they need to raise the rates, you said. And she says, well, here's the reason why. I'm like, reason why? And she says, the reason why they don't want to raise the rates, one of the reasons. I go, yeah, what is that? Mm-hmm. Oh, because they're homeless and they think they're just going to go and buy drugs with it. So they penalize the whole system, saying, no, that's why we don't want to raise the rates.
Yeah, and that's part of the stigma and the systemic discrimination we're talking about, right?
So let's dive into the pinpointers, Neil.
Yeah, I wanted to quickly, we always talk about going back to in the Wayback Machine, like getting into our DeLorean, the DeLorean, right? And going back to the future or back in time. And I just wanted to quickly, as much as possible, quickly go through a brief history lesson. And I think, Dan, you can appreciate this as well, because we know there's so much copy and paste that happens between provinces, right? So what happened here in BC is exact.
Neil, when this DeLorean hits 88 miles an hour, you're some serious shit.
There you go. So I'm just gonna give a snapshot of the history of BC. Yeah. And Dan, like I said, if you do your own research, I'm sure you'll find out similar things in Ontario's history of what they did as well, because there's a lot of it's copy and paste. But so let's go back to the Wayback Machine. Starting in August 5th, 1871. So that's going way back in the Wayback Machine, right? August 5th, 1871, and that is when the first Ministry of Attorney General Ministry of Attorney General in British Columbia was created, was on that date. So that was about a month after BC entered Confederation. So they created a ministry for the Attorney General. And the first Attorney General happened to be this John Forster McCreight. And he was the first Attorney General and also the first Premier of BC. So again, that was 1871. And that was a month after BC entered Canada Confederation, okay? And then let's fast forward now from 1871 and go right ahead to November 7th, 1973. And you can say, well, what was that, Neil? And what that was the BC Human Rights Code was assented or enacted. So it was the BC Human Rights Code was enacted on November 7, 1973. And you go, wow, that's significant. So that's another benchmark to put in our back pocket. And then fast forward again on March 31st, 2003. That is when the BC Human Rights Tribunal was created. So our first BC Human Rights Tribunal was created in March 31st, 2003. And what that gave access to was that gave people like you and me direct access to the Act, where we could basically launch discrimination complaints through the Act, through the BC Human Rights Tribunal. And interestingly, the BC Human Rights Tribunal was the first human rights tribunal in all of Canada. Mm-hmm. We were the first ones in BC. We were the first ones to create a human rights tribunal. And again, so that was in March 31st, 2003. So that was only we're only talking 21 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. And when you consider that I've been fighting them for the last 12, ooh. So I've been fighting them for over 50% of their existence, of their entire existence. I've been fighting them for 12. They've only been around for 21, and I've been fighting them for 12 with my clawback issue, right? The clawback of my pension issue.
Well, see, and that's part of the problem here in Ontario too, right? Is that it's not only nothing has changed, but they're actually going back to what they were doing in 1990s.
Yeah.
So what made me homeless in 1997, for those of you that don't know, I became homeless. and that didn't end until 2016. But I noticed that the programs that they cut and the funds that they cut in certain issues are the same issues that were going on back then. And then they rectified it somewhat, and now they're bringing it back again. So it's not serving anybody, especially somebody like Neil, who has to fight for 12 years to get proper things that were not only earned, but that were deserved, that were a necessity to get through the moments that he was going through at the time with his family. So just imagine that's one story out of 40 million people, a couple of million of whom are disabled.
You know, we've established that you have the BC Human Rights Now. Mm-hmm. It was started in 2003, mm-hmm. and you already have your Attorney General. So those are two mechanisms that are supposedly there to protect people's rights and protect against discrimination. And then you have a third one in September of 2019. We have the new BC Office of Human Rights Commissioner. That was started in September of 2019. Mm-hmm. And I thought, wow, this is great. Now I have a third mechanism to oversee and put my complaint about my clawback to. Yeah. I thought this is great. So right away, as soon as they got birthed in September 2019, I thought, I'm going to send them an email and tell them, okay, explain to me why the provincial government can purposely unprotect a protected pension money.
Yeah.
Why are they able to unprotect a protected pension money? And and they're like, thank you for your question. You know, we'll file it under G, under the cylinder G. I mean, that's probably what they thought. You know.
Yeah. Carburetor.
But thank you for your email. And I never heard anything. I didn't hear anything from them. And so I would copy them other emails and said, could you please inquire to the government, like, why can they not acknowledge the truth of what a pension is? A pension is a protected income. Can you please get the government to acknowledge the truth of what a pension is, that is a protected income? And they're like, thank you for your email again, and we have to say too, when I was sending all these emails, we have to remember that David Eby, who is now the Premier of BC here, he was the Attorney General himself for 5 or 6 years here.
That's right too. Yes.
And so I would be sending him the emails too. And again, crickets. I would be ignored. It's like, can you please acknowledge the truth of what a pension is? It's a protected income. Why is a protected income allowed to be unprotected by the government and clawed back?
Yeah.
So again, a very simple truth question is like, this is a truth and fact that the government is clawing back a protected income. Why are they clawing back something that's supposed to be protected? And it's like, it's crickets. So again, we're going through this chronologically, right? So let's go now to and this is going to be a quiz, and first one that gets it right gets a prize. Okay, so everybody get your caps on. I'm going to mention the date, March 11, 2020. Who knows what that date was? March 11, 2020. Dan.
The day COVID was announced and everybody was sent home.
Exactly. Bingo.
Yes.
You get the prize.
Dan, you win. You win, Dan.
You win the prize. And that's exactly what
I was the only person in my office out of 7 people that was told you either have the choice to go home without pay or you can come into the office as this is all going on.
Yeah. That's exactly the date. It was March 11, 2020, when COVID was officially announced by the World Health Organization as a world pandemic problem, right? Mm-hmm. And so then everybody that has a disability, we all saw, like, immediately this whole big bright light shone on this. We all saw these inequalities that were happening, right? Because everybody else was getting this CERB, $2,000 a month
within a week, just over a week.
With a few days, a few days, it was like $2,000 $2,000 of CERB, and people with disabilities got nothing, and everybody's like, what? And to their credit, a lot of people in media were saying, what is going on? Like, this is not fair. A lot of people in media were recognizing it. So again, hats off to them. They were recognizing it, right? So, you can say, well, that's good. I mean, everybody was recognizing it. But here's where I'm going to bring it back to our wonderful BC Office of Human Rights Commissioner again. I think it was with the pandemic still going on. I mean, it's still going on today. But with the pandemic going on, I think it was in 2021 or 2022, the BC Office of Human Rights Commissioner here decided we're going to fund an official study on the systemic racism that's happening now with the pandemic. But like there's an uptick in systemic racism. Yep. And I mean, yeah, that's a fair point. It's true. There was an uptick in
cheers on that one.
In systemic racism, right? But it just blows me away because, we have the BC Human Rights Tribunal here. Since their inception, they've been very clear about the fact that there's over half of all submitted complaints to the Human Rights Tribunal here in BC. Over half are from people with disabilities.
I was reading that report.
Over half.
Yeah, that's huge.
And only about 15% of complaints are racial related. And so, not to say that racial thing isn't important, but when you compare that for the last 21 years since the inception of BC Human Rights Tribunal, since the inception, over half of all complaints have been people with disabilities, and only 15% are racial. And for some reason, the new commissioner, the Commissioner of Human Rights here in BC, decides our very first commission study is going to be on racism, when they could have done, and maybe this is selfish of me because I'm a person with this disability, but you got to think. I mean, like, there's been 30 years of deliberate systemic discrimination against people with disabilities. Deliberate. And the very first study they're going to do is on racism, because everybody was talking about the disability and inequality. Everybody was talking about everybody. So they decide we're going to talk about racism instead.
The fact of the matter is, the race card makes for a feel-good news story.
Yep.
Yeah,
and
that's
I don't care who matters this. It's the absolute truth. When it comes to homelessness doesn't have a fucking color, a sex, an ethnic background. Homelessness doesn't care what's between your legs or how tall you are. Yep. Homelessness is an issue that affects every single person. So I think from what Neil explained from the systemic part of things, the problem is the same across the country. The red tape has been atrocious. And then unfortunately, over the years, a couple of these feel-good news stories come along and dilute everything else. When it comes to life and death issues, such as homelessness, that affect all of us, no matter what your race is. Homelessness, seniors issues, children's issues. We got to tackle this as humans first. Until we get to that point, we're never going to get it right, and we're going to keep spinning.
Yeah, 100%, Dan. And one of the reasons why we deliberately wanted to do a pre-record today is because I wanted to make this show about a little bit about show and tell. Like, if you remember, Brent, we had my friend Kent on the podcast. That was back in when was it? March 28th. We had my friend Kent, and he talked about racism, discrimination versus disability discrimination. That was what the show was about, right? Because he's a black man, right? And those that don't know, I mean, we've been friends. Him and I have been friends since like we were 10 years old. Wow. And if you call him up, like, he's a huge fan of Spider-Man, and same with me. So that's kind of why that's one of the reasons, I guess, why we hooked up, maybe, because he's a huge fan of Spider-Man, and I'm a huge fan of Spider-Man. And so if you call him up, and you'll get his voicemail. It says, "Hi friends, it's your friendly neighborhood black man here. I'm at home right now, but please leave a message." And so that's his voicemail. If you get his voicemail, it's like, "Your friendly neighborhood black man here." And but when Kent was on the show, I'm gonna include a little snippet of it here. But he talked about the levers of discrimination, and he said, as a black man, and I'm not saying, like, this is just his experience only, but he says as a black man who is disabled as well, has a physical disability, he says, my experience has been, if somebody's going to pull a lever, a discriminatory lever on me, they're always going to pull the disability discrimination lever on me, not the race card. They're gonna pull the disability one first. Always, he says that's been my experience. They always pull that one first.
I have lived a life that I describe as almost entirely free of conscious racism, and meaning that racism that I was aware was happening, because most of the time, if people are looking for a discriminatory lever to use against me, on the hierarchy of socially acceptable discriminatory levers, disability still has a certain degree of acceptability. In order even for disability to enter in to the discrimination conversation, we had to get to where a preponderance of society, at least, was willing to admit or accept that people with disabilities should even have a visibly functional place in the world.
So that's one of the first things I wanted to share. The other thing I wanted to share, and I mean, I gave the video to you, Brent, and I gave the video to Dan.
Yes.
Because Kent and I always have we often have a debriefing after the podcast, because he watches the podcast, and so we talk about my clawback a lot, because he knows, like, it's been like 12 years for me, this clawback. And
terrible, this clawback.
And he says, "Are you sure that the government is doing this on purpose?"
Oh.
And and so we compare notes, and I said, yeah, they're doing this on purpose. And he says, well, he says, I just saw this video that the BC Office of Human Rights Commissioner put out, and again, you saw the video, Dan, and you saw the video, Brent. Yeah. And it reminded me of all the bubbles. It reminded me exactly of the.
It's great though, right, Neil? I mean, and Dan, wow. It works. Why change it?
This ad, I'm going to insert it, but this ad from the BC Office of Human Rights Commissioner, it reminded me exactly of these Colgate toothpaste commercial ads, where it's like, look at all how good the cartoon bubbles are shining up the teeth. Look at how good they're doing. Look what good job they're doing.
New Colgate Active Salt. It has a unique formula, and it helps fight hidden germs, helps keep the gums healthy and teeth strong.
And this ad that the commissioner put out is exactly the same. It's like, look at these shiny, happy, disabled people.
When do we know we belong? When we're at home? When we have places to learn, chances to play, spaces where our voices are heard. For people who've always had these things, it can be hard to see or even believe that other people don't. That the systems we have set up don't work for everyone. They single some people out and leave others behind. Working-aged people with disabilities are 21% less likely to be employed than people without disabilities. This is systemic discrimination. Discrimination in our systems benefits some and harms others. Intentional or not, the effect is the same. It builds a world of injustice and inequity. But we all play a role in creating the world we want to build together. We can listen to voices that are left out. And we have the power to challenge and change these systems. Because while we don't all experience the same barriers, we do all want the same thing: to belong and to be treated fairly and equally.
Shiny, happy, disabled people, the cartoon people, look at how well we are standing up against systemic racism, systemic discrimination against people with disabilities. Look at how well we're doing. And it's like, well, you know what? Show your work. Because they had an opportunity back when the pandemic was first announced. They had the opportunity to instead do a study on the systemic discrimination that was happening against people with disabilities. They had the opportunity to show their work then, and they've chosen not to. And they've chosen to ignore me too. And I said, show me the truth of what a pension is. They've ignored me.
They can't handle the truth.
They can't. And we have our Attorney General, David Eby, who was the Attorney General for 5 or 6 years. He ignored me too. Can you please tell me the truth of what a pension is? Crickets. So that's what I'm getting to. All these ghosts. All these ghosts of allowing this systemic stuff that goes on. But, I wanted to transition into now. There's 8 clear examples of systemic discrimination against people with disabilities. And we're going to go through 8. And people are going to say, well, 8 examples, Neil. Are you sure there's 8?
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure there's only 1 or 2. There can't be 8. There can't be 8, Neil.
And the numbers keep growing longer.
There can't be 8. But I'm going to prove to you that there are 8.
Oh, yes.
And we're going to go through every single one of these. Okay. So the first one of systemic disability discrimination is number 1 is the way that the Ministry of Social Development treats people with disabilities like criminals. That's number 1. That is systemic discrimination. To automatically be treated like a criminal, what's the first thing you do when you get into the office? They say, empty your pockets. Empty your pockets. You're not allowed to have any money on you. Empty your pockets, right?
Yeah. How much you have to declare? Oh, you got a penny. When we had pennies, throw your change on the table. Let's see. Oh, you got 17 cents. Do you have any more money?
And
wallet.
And what's one of the questions on the declaration card there, Brent?
Have you been incarcerated in the last 30 days?
When's the last time you were in jail? That is on the declaration card.
Yeah. Yes.
Every month you have to sign. Yep. Have I been in jail this month?
Yeah.
Every month, a person with a disability has to sign. Have I been in jail this month? Beyond
despicable.
So again, they treat people with disabilities like criminals. That is example number 1. Okay? Example number 2, we have no freedom of movement.
That's right.
What's the rule, Brent? You can go over the rule. No freedom of movement.
The freedom of movement. You can't leave your province for more than 30 days without a pass. And I've talked about this on the podcast before of saying, oh, well, Brent, you got to go to the washroom. Okay, well, just go. Don't tell me about your problems. Go. And I learned this going through elementary school. I learned this through kindergarten, elementary school, right? High school, college. I mean, really, and I had these discussions in college too, right? And one of my instructors, actually many instructors, but one of them personally was pissed off, like beyond pissed off. Okay, so government, understand this. This is coming from college instructors. They said, what? That makes no goddamn sense. That there's a quote unquote from an instructor. Like, really? Like, you got to change the language on these declaration cards. And also the basically the part of the criteria that you say, oh well, you can't leave more than 30 days. You need permission. And so when I say you need to go to the washroom, go. In other words, you need to go to another province for more than 30 days. Don't tell me about your problem, Brent. Go. You don't need permission. Go.
Yeah.
Why? Because you are a Canadian citizen. You are a resident in your province, but you are a Canadian citizen. Unless Canada is going to be into each province. Oh, Canada, the province of British Columbia, Canada. Each province. Are we going to become each individual country in each province? Is that how we're doing it? No. We're Canadian citizens. So treat people with disabilities with respect and dignity and give them the autonomy to make decisions themselves. Now, when I remember we had a minister that was actually on, we asked that question. Why? Remember that, Neil? We asked the question, why is it that people can't leave a province?
Yeah.
Well, because their counterpart felt that there wasn't enough, there wasn't interest. There wasn't enough interest in the movement of people.
Yeah.
Really? Yes,
what did you have to say, Dan?
Sorry, Dan, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, no, I'm really sorry because there must be a delay on my end, man. I see you talking, but I didn't hear anything, so my bad. But they got to ask questions, right? They do got to have their checks and balances in place. But for you not to be able to travel or not to be able to have a relationship or something, that come on, man. That's bullshit.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's go to number 3 now. This is the third example, and this is kind of related to the freedom of movement thing. Mm-hmm. So this is why I labeled it as number 3. It's the no yearly bus pass for people with disabilities. We used to have a yearly bus pass. People, seniors have the yearly bus pass still, but people with disabilities no longer. We no longer get the yearly bus pass. It used to be $40 for the year. Was it $40 or $45?
45.
45 for the year, and we don't get it anymore.
Yeah, in 2016, the administration that was actually in government at the time was known as the BC Liberal Party of British Columbia. The government chose to have a minister who made a handful decision to change a whole system. A handful. When I say a handful, no more than 6. Okay.
Yeah, it was literally no more than 6. We're not even exaggerating.
6
not
people
even
in a rural area.
Yeah.
Okay. So we call it urban, and there's urban and rural. Rural meaning outlining areas where they don't have conventional transit, and I can understand that. I understand that not every area of the province is going to have conventional transit where you could just get on the bus and go where you need to go. So when you got rural areas where people will use a taxi, they'll have a family friend, maybe they'll drive them from to their appointments, medical appointments, wherever they need to go, grocery shopping. Maybe people don't drive, or maybe they're PWD and they do drive, and so they were given a special transportation subsidy in those rural areas of British Columbia. When they were given that STS, is what it stood for, Special Transportation Subsidy. Okay, so they had a lump sum, $692.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So back then, that was a lot of money. You could actually go and buy a basic car insurance, or maybe top it up with your own money from your provincial disability check, or maybe you were working, or maybe you were subsidizing your income with some employment at the time, or maybe you weren't, or maybe you just saved up money from your GST credits and whatever.
That could buy a lot of taxi savers too,
Yeah, but people were actually using that money and paying for their insurance, a whole year insurance for their vehicle. The government said, well, there was not fairness and equity in the system, so we wanted to make it fairness overall. So we scrapping the STS. We're going to take away the people in the urban bus pass program. We're going to dismantle the whole thing. We're going to give everybody $52 a month if they want to have the money. But they don't want to have the money, they can have a bus pass. So the ones in the urban areas, obviously, there's no conventional bus, so they can have the $52. But the ones who choose. But
again, Brent, let's pause for a moment because equity, by definition, equity is when you restore something. It's a restorative action. Equity is restorative action. It's not taking something away.
Yeah.
You don't take something away and say that's equity. By taking something, That's not the definition of equity. And so, Michelle Stilwell, she should have known what equity is. And everybody in government should know what equity is. And the fact that, people know what equity is and they don't care, but they'll just say, oh, we did it for equity in the system. It's a bullshit answer, but who cares? We'll just say it's equity. Mm-hmm.
Well, the problem with that system, how they set it up, is if people make a decision where they want to have the money and they need to use it to go and buy more groceries, well, they got no transportation. So you have to choose between having that money or having a bus pass. What if you change your mind and you're halfway through the month, go, you know what, I want that bus pass. The government says, no, sorry, you've already opted out. We can opt you back in, but you got to wait to the next month, the next check day. So now you got to go without all the way until the next check day to get that bus pass. Now, because we have a Canada Post strike, guess what, folks? Good luck getting that bus pass sticker, right? So,
Just to touch it very, very briefly here in Toronto, Ontario, before the way it used to work is if you were on OW or ODSP, you would go into the office, give in your paperwork, and they'd either, like you said, put in that money or what have you. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong on the live hit, maybe later on. But I believe the last I heard is the way it works now is that you bring your slip and down to the office of the TTC and you get a reduced rate on the Metro Pass for the month.
Okay. That's good.
I could be wrong. If I am, somebody correct me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, number 4, Brent, we could spend a whole hour or two on the next one. So please,
we won't.
But please know. This is the one that's, I know, near and dear to your heart. And we could go for an hour if we wanted to, but we won't. We won't.
No.
And it's
we'll do another podcast on that.
No rental subsidies. Actually, it's 4 and 5. I'm going to talk about 4 and 5. First one is 4 is no rental subsidies offered like Safers. So you have seniors who get the Safers amount. It's a senior supplement to handle their rents. But if you got a person with this disability, you do not get anything equivalent to a Safers. The government says, well, we're already offering RGI units to 12% of the people on PWD assistance. 12%. We're giving RGI units to 12%. So it's like, yay, slow clap. 12% of PWD are getting RGI. So job done, right? Job done. 12%. Job done. I'm sorry, job's not done. And then we can quickly go to number 5 because it's all related. Number 5 is where the Human Rights Code clearly states that in cases of tenancy disputes, source of income is a source. Source of income is a source of discrimination. So, like you've always said, Brent, you have landlords that are deliberately discriminating now, saying, well, you're only getting $1,500. You only have $1,500.
So I'll give a quick example.
Quick example of that.
Yeah, I won't dive into too much because we'll talk on another podcast. Because we're actually going to do another podcast about this episode, this topic. So people that may be interested in hearing what I want to say, what I'm going to be saying about it, tune in. Stay tuned on that one. But I'll give you a quick overview. I went to a corporate landlord. I won't give too much away because we'll be talking about this on a podcast. Sonia and myself went to a corporate landlord. Okay. The rent was advertised at $1,410 at the time. The landlord said, no, it was $1,435. Well, Sonia says, I saw it for $1,410. Fine, I'll give it to you for $1,410. Imagine that. $1,410. Okay, nothing fancy about the building. Why? Because I saw the building getting built way back in the early 1990s. So I know about the building. And it's actually right in Langley. It's right near the City Hall. Neil, you might know where it is.
Mm-hmm,
Yep. It's right there, folks, right there. I saw the building getting built. Nice building, though.
Mm-hmm.
A nice building. Here's the icing on the cake. Actually, you know what? I'll even throw in the candles. The candles are going to be the Roman candles that are going to explode when people hear about this. The icing on the cake was Yeah, hey, you know what? You've got to have $60,000 to rent here. Who on PWD or anybody on median income is going to afford to rent there? The doctors, nurses, lawyers, practitioners. Really, like, that's the bare bone. They were willing to rent at $60,000 to rent a place at $1,410.
Yeah.
So that's $5,000 a month. Okay, and wait, we don't get $5,000 a month between the two of us. Well, I'll talk to the corporate lab. I'll talk to them and see what they can maybe lower down to 45. You know what? Even I'm sure I can explain your circumstance. We'll lower it down to 4,000. Just tell the government to give you a rate increase up to $2,000 each. What?
And it's because they're using the same RGI formula of 30%, right?
Yes, 30%.
It has to be 30%. So in order to satisfy that 30%, you have to be making $60,000. Yeah.
If it's 30%, it's 100,000. So she said this is at 50, and we're willing to go no lower than 50. And sometimes the landlord wants 60 or 70. I'm like, say what? I didn't understand what was going on. So that I'm going to save all the rest of it for the next podcast, because people are going to be saying, what the heck is going on here? Yeah. The reasons behind it all.
Okay. Yeah. And so, this whole thing of the government says that source of income cannot be a source of discrimination. So they say that, but yet the landlords still hold the trump card where they can still deny you and say, well, I'm sorry, you're not making enough. Too bad. Sorry, here's the door. Goodbye. Well, and let's go to number 6 now, the example number 6 of systemic discrimination. And that is, again, it's related. So 4, 5, and 6 are all related. But the 6th one is current BC housing policy. So BC Housing, who's the provider, it's the provider of subsidized housing here in BC. The current BC housing policies force dependent relationships onto people that have disabilities. They force dependent relationships. So it's like, if you want to rent from us, you basically have to be in a relationship, or we're not going to rent to you, or we're not going to give you the housing.
Yeah. So with that topic, I'll quickly do as an overview for our listeners and anyone watching live. I made a phone call because I was wanting to inquire to find a little bit more. How does this work? You basically have to be homeless in order to qualify. Okay, so it's like an RGI. Same thing. You'd be fleeing violence. Your place has to be sold or condemned and uninhabitable. There's so many reasons of why. But if you're just wanting to have cheaper rent, you pay high market rent, and you want cheaper housing, you got to meet the criteria, like Neil just mentioned. You got to meet the criteria under BC Housing's regulations, their policies. The policy is that if you have a friend, you have a roommate, or maybe someone that you know on the street, you bumped into and said, hey, you know what? Why don't we go and share a place? Let's go and apply at BC Housing. BC Housing says, nope, that's not how it works. You can't have a friend or a roommate or someone that you know that wants to share accommodation with you in your place. You got to be in a relationship. I said, oh, really? So you're basically saying there's no guarantee. They said, no. Well, why are you using the word guarantee? I said, well, that's my word. Like, well, that's not under the terminology. So the problem is, they'd have to go with the status quo. Yeah. So I said, so how do you basically qualify? You have to be in a relationship status. So you have to be under one household, one check, household income. I said, okay, so if you had 8 people, and I guess if you're all in a relationship, maybe 10 people, maybe 12, maybe 20, I said, excuse me? I go, okay, so if there's 20 of us and we're all in a relationship,
sharing one bathroom.
Yeah, could we now qualify? Technically, yes. Imagine that, Dan. 20 people, we're all in a relationship.
So they support polygamy. Yeah, polygamy is fine.
Yeah.
Polygamy is fine.
It's messed up. It's really bad.
You're asking the wrong guy. I'm the guy that's been single for like 14 fucking years, so that's not in my vocabulary. I think very quickly on that too is that one thing I will say is that, for quick example, when I was at city council, part of my job was to take the phone calls about people's housing applications and shit like that.
Mm-hmm.
And too often I was getting like cases like single mothers who had their 6-day-old babies on the TTC train taking care of them because they didn't have nowhere to go. So one of the, and I don't need a pat on the back because I already got the pat on the back for this.
Yeah.
But one of the hobbies I used to do was I used to, in my break time, my lunchtime, apartment hunt for cheap apartments online, because there was no outlet within the city even to give these people an answer or even a proper place to go. So if before people start dogging everybody in government, look into your local municipalities and see who's working in the background. And there's always somewhere to go where you can Google or you can visit. But it is tough when apartments are going for $2,500 to start.
Yeah. No, for sure.
It's mind-boggling because you have to meet that criteria. And good on you on that, Dan. I mean, for doing that awesome legwork and
That's
helping
great.
navigate the bureaucratic system for housing. But it really boggles my mind when it comes to the housing of all this criteria, why people need to have that criteria met. People just want a safe place they can call home.
You know the other thing about housing, Brent, is I mean I've said this example a few times already. When I used to work for the Disability Foundation, Sam Sullivan's Disability Foundation, I did that for 7 years, and one of the clients I had, he was in BC Housing, so he was a BC Housing client. They gave him a place, but one place he was at, he had a neighbor that was literally trying to he was threatening to kill him every single day. He had this neighbor that was threatening to kill, like legitimately trying to kill him every single day, like not exaggeration.
Yeah.
And so the client said, like, could you please move me? And then BC Housing said, well, okay, we'll move you this one time. I was like, but you realize, like, their attitude was almost like, well, you realize it's kind of your fault. Like they basically gaslighted him and says, well, like they guilted him and said, well, you know that we're only going to move you this one time, and if you complain again, like, you're off the system, right? So he got moved again to this other place, and his other place didn't have a guy that was going to threaten to kill him, which is good. But this new place had smelly carpets where, like, it was really bad, and the landlord was refusing to clean them. So because of that, this guy was getting really bad headaches and wasn't able to sleep or eat properly. And yet the government was telling him also, can you please get a job? Can you please get a job, even though you cannot sleep and eat properly with these smelly carpets? Can you please get a job and get off the system? And he's like, well, how can I get a job when I can't sleep and I can't eat?
Yeah.
You know?
My God.
Well, see, and you're hitting the nail right on the head, right? It's like, to what I said earlier, if these people don't have the lived experience in the field, if they don't live it, they don't know it.
Yeah.
They're never going to figure it out. And until they start taking the stories of shows like this, and like, I don't know anything about federal stuff, for example. Everything I'm learning about federal stuff and clawbacks and stuff has been from you guys.
Yeah.
So it's like, we have to share and come together and such, but they have to stop with this preconceived notion that we all have the same fucking issues.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because we all have different issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I learned that a couple of days ago, just briefly, and I, it was overwhelming. I'll use it that way. It was overwhelming walking toward a ministry's, a government office, and these people all on the stairs, and they're, some of them are stretched out here and there. 2 security guys, or a lady and a guy inside the building, inside the ministry's office building, not letting anybody else in the door. I mean, in my life, I've never thought of having security people inside a government office building, right? Yeah. They're everywhere. They're in the grocery store, just up the road from there. They also have a McDonald's, and it was just on the news the other day. Apparently, there was it was all cornered off, taped off. McDonald's was taped off just up from the ministry's office, and they're a grocery store because it was a confrontation with a homeless person. And I found out that the person wasn't doing anything wrong. It was a disagreement. But of course, the media threw it right out there, right? I mean, look at the underlying issue. Let's deal with the problem rather than skirt the problem saying, oh, nothing to see here, folks.
Yeah. Let's go now to number 7 and 8, Brent. We got to get through the list here.
Okay.
Number 7 is we're going to talk about employment for people with disabilities. So that is systemic issue number 7. Okay. Yeah. And it's employers will publish ads like they'll say must be able to lift 25 or 50 pounds.
Oh, yes.
Right? They have that one sentence in there, must be able to lift 25 or 50 pounds or whatever it is. So right off the bat, you're disqualifying people with disabilities right off the bat. And that's one thing, right? And remember when we had just Tamara Taggart on the show and she was talking about her son with Down syndrome. And remember she said that her son is in a public school, but he has a separate entrance where he goes to school, and he has a separate entrance where he leaves the school. So he never actually mingles with the regular students in the school, right? It's always a separate entrance to go into the school and a separate entrance to get out of the school. And what do they do? What do they do in the class, Brent? Remember, she said they have washing machines. They have washing machines in the classroom where they do their wash. They learn how to do washing. Yeah. And she says they also do menial jobs like they stack the juice boxes for the other students in the school. They stack the juice boxes at lunch. And remember what Tamara Taggart said? She says, well, do the other students do that too? Do the other students stack the juice boxes? And what did the school say? No, it's just for your boy and just for people like your boy. They can do those stupid jobs, of stacking the juice boxes. We don't want to have the other students do that because it's too below them to do it. But your son can do it. That's fine, right? Yeah,
exactly. And it really alienates people with disabilities out of certain equations. It's like favoritism, not favoritism. Sorry, that's the wrong word. Segregation.
Yeah.
And again, you can't lift more than 25 to 50 pounds, or you can't do it. Oh, you must be disabled.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, you don't want.
Sorry, you don't get the job.
Because I've been through that. And a judgment from an employer. Oh, sorry, we don't need that position in our establishment. Yeah, if you can't be fast enough there doing this. Yeah, we don't need that. But I want to learn. I want to be able to do that. Yeah, it's going to cost the business too much money to do that. So thanks anyway. But we're just accepting applications. I'm like, so you don't want to hire a person with disabilities? I didn't say that. I go, yeah, you did. I said admit that, but you don't want to.
You already did in your ad when you said must be able to lift 25 pounds.
Yep.
We have one more example. Of systemic discrimination against people with disabilities, Brent. One more example. It's example number 8. And that's to do with my clawback issue. Again, it's not only me, it's thousands of other people, right? Not just me, but this issue is when you fail to protect a protected income. You're failing to protect a protected income, and you're saying that's okay. That is a systemic discrimination when you're failing to protect a protected income and saying that's okay. We are a protected status, Brent. You and I are protected status. You have a disability. I have a disability. Not only that, I am also a widower.
Yes.
So I'm protected under that status too. So I'm a widower and somebody with a disability. So I'm protected under those two things. And yet the government says, we don't care if you're protected. We don't care if the pension is a protected thing. We don't need to protect a protected person on a protected income. We'll just unprotect it. And our BC Human Rights Tribunal says, oh, that's fine. That's fine. And I was able talk to one a few years ago, like kind of way back. His name was Stephen. I forget his last name, but his first name was Stephen. He called me on the phone, and I said, well, like, you know, so you're saying that the truth doesn't matter then. You're saying that the truth of a pension doesn't matter. And his response was, well, that's the way the Human Rights Code is written. And I'm saying, so you're saying that the government can lie. You're saying that the government can lie and pervert a pension and say that the truth of the pension doesn't matter. And again, he just repeated the same thing. He says, well, that's the way the Human Rights Code is written. And I told him, well, if that's the way it's written, I said it's broken. I said it should be fixed. If that's the way it's written, it's broken. It needs to be fixed.
That's what I said to BC Housing, the same thing. That's how the legislation is written. And I said, well, then fix it.
Because that's systemic discrimination. Because we know for a fact, Brent, and we know for, like, you could say this is the same thing, Dan. We know that, like, say, for example, in Toronto, in Ontario, if we had Doug Ford was getting his pension clawed back, right? If he was getting his pension clawed back, and
he'd be pissed.
He would be pissed, right? And if David Eby,
he'd have bees flying around him like crazy.
Yeah, and if David Eby was getting his pension clawed back, he would be pissed too. If I had the power to claw back his pension, and I put in a bill to claw back his pension, you can bet by lunchtime, he would have another bill put in to reverse that and say, give me back my pension because that's discriminatory, Neil. You can't do that. It's discriminatory, right?
Yeah. Well, that's one of those sayings that they say often and not, right? That good for thee and not for me.
Yeah.
They figure in their minds, because I was around it for years, right? Like direct hands-on experience. And in their mind, disabled people don't vote. Disabled people are going to die eventually. Disabled people don't pad my pockets, right? And that's part of the problem.
Yeah,
we got to get away.
Yeah,
we don't count, and that's part of the systemic discrimination. Because we don't count.
It's the mindset, right? It's saying, well, they're unemployed, or like, they're disabled. But again, like, and I always talk about it. It can happen to anybody at any time. Just because, like, the politicians, they're protected. They're, like, they call it privileged. Like they're protected. And I remember some of the MPs, some of our other guests we've had on too, and like we've taught them. They said, like, they even admitted, like, they're not ableist, but I think maybe the word might have been used before. But they're saying, like, we're privileged. We don't understand what it's like to be disabled. But so we're teaching some of them, or learning really well, and that's great. I want every single one of them to be taught that it's okay. And I'm going to say this again publicly. It's okay, politicians. It's okay to change the regulations.
Yeah.
Like
you need to.
Like you don't have to keep the status quo going. Like, don't know, like, somebody's telling you, no, you can't change it. I give you permission. We all give you permission.
Yeah. I wanted to wrap up the show just basically quickly talking about the three ghosts of Christmas past for BC. And I know, Dan, you probably have your own example of three ghosts that you could pick for Ontario.
They come out of the closet, Dan.
But here in BC, we have our three ghosts, and who are they, Brent? They're Mike Harcourt. Mike Harcourt from 93, 94.
91. I believe it was 91 till 96. 96.
That's true. I was going to say in 93, 94 though, that's when he got in front of the cameras and said,
"Oh yes,
everybody on welfare is a cheat, varmint, and deadbeat." So again, we have ghost number one is Mike Harcourt.
Yeah.
93, 94 that's when he said everybody on welfare is a cheat, varmint, and deadbeat. Then we have Gordon Campbell. He ran from 2001 to 2011. Yeah. And his call to fame was getting everybody reassessed who was on PWD, and he did that in 2002.
Yeah, I was one of the candidates.
A lot of people, we have to say, committed suicide because of that. So Gordon Campbell actually has blood on his hands because of that decision. And how much money did they save from that, Brent? Like it was pennies. It was pennies.
It was literally pennies.
It was literally pennies that they saved. Again, we got to get off the show, Brent. So let's go to our last ghost.
Yeah.
And our last ghost is Christy Clark. She was premier from 2011 to 2017. And if you remember, she was a big fan of dogs. Do you remember?
Oh yes.
She was a huge fan of dogs, and she was quoted as saying that the
dogs and kennels.
That the dogs the dogs are such they where's the quote? I have to find the quote, sorry. Give me a second here. She says, "We need to look after our pets. They are the most vulnerable in our society."
Oh, yes.
Remember? She actually said that. We have to look after our pets. They are the most vulnerable in our society.
Mm-hmm.
And she said that. I remember she said that like almost like within a day or two of saying saying that people with disabilities didn't need any more income. It was kind of in that lens where she made an announcement about people with disabilities not needing any more. We're already supporting people with disabilities, and yet she has this quote saying, "Please look after our pets. They are the most vulnerable in our society." So right. I mean,
yeah, we're going to take care of our pets better than we're going to take care of our citizens. Yeah.
I just wanted to basically finish off the show. Like, remember we had that heat dome. It was the summer of 2021. We had that really bad heat dome. There was 619 people died. 690 people died in that heat dome of summer 2021. And most of those people were people that were either seniors or people with disabilities. Mm-hmm. The majority of the 619 that died were either seniors or people with disabilities, and again, God bless John Horgan, But I remember one of his quotes was at the time, and he must have been under a lot of stress back then. But I remember one of his quotes was, "Well, that's what happens when you get old." They said, "Well, what are you going to do, John? All these people died," and he's like, "Well, that's what happens when you get old. You die." Mm-hmm. That was his quote.
I remember that.
And it was like, no, that's not a nice thing to say, because the real reason why people died is because they were, the majority of them that died were in SROs that had no air conditioning. Mm-hmm. Because the government says that seniors and people with disabilities that live in SROs don't deserve air conditioning.
There was one of the mayor.
So you deserve to die instead.
Yeah, the mayor in Vancouver had actually gone up there to see one of the SROs and couldn't even be in there 5 minutes. Had to leave because he doesn't understand how people could even live in that environment. I mean, again, that comes from a politician who saw it firsthand, and it was terrible. And again, is that how we treat our society? I mean, with dignity and respect? Give people proper housing, permanent proper housing, and treat them with dignity and respect. I mean, as my mom used to always say to me, Brent, he goes, "Do unto others as you want done unto you."
Well, like we just went through a list of eight discriminations, right? We went through a whole list of 8 of them. There was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them.
And there could be a lot more.
And that list of 8 is proof that we do not have dignity and respect.
We narrowed it down to 8 of them. But
the government doesn't care about dignity and respect. I mean, that list of 8 proves that in their minds, people with disabilities do not deserve dignity and respect. We deserve to be treated like criminals. We don't deserve a safe place to live. It doesn't matter if we have somebody that's threatening to kill us. It doesn't matter if we have smelly carpets. It doesn't matter if we get passed over for housing. It doesn't matter if we get passed over for employment. It doesn't matter if somebody tells us to stack the juice boxes because that's all we're capable of doing is stacking juice boxes. All that doesn't matter, Brent. You know, all that doesn't matter because of systemic discrimination. All that doesn't matter, right? But we have to get off the show. But that, you know.
Well, that totally makes a lot of sense. You know, it's basically, like I say, segregating disabled people away from society. How governments used to have people with disabilities in institutions. I mean, wow! Like looking back at history, and people say, "What? I didn't know that." Well, no, the public don't know that, right? But it was about educating the public and letting them know that going forward, things have to change. We can change things as a society. And the reports have come out saying that once people actually become disabled, they become now part of the system. Like this is system. And then they go, oh no, I remember I used to advocate. Yeah, it's a systemic thing. So they say, I used to advocate so that this didn't happen. And then they become part of it. Again, we can actually all work together as society and change things going forward so that when children grow up to be our age, they're not going to be going through this BS. Okay.
Yeah.
And when seniors, their disability continues on, we need to change this system so that the system that you have now goes forward. It doesn't stop at 65.
Yeah.
Right? Same as the CDB, right? I think that's you know, and Joseph has said this before. The one day when he was on the show, he goes, "I said from the beginning they're going to use this as a little carrot trick, as an election ploy." Again, I thank Joseph on that. Again, government, don't use the disabled as pawns to your advantage to try to win votes over. Because what you're doing right now is not working. Okay, for one thing, you didn't even give $250. You guys voted it down. Okay, that's not a good look. That's not a way to win votes. And even if you did try to win votes for it, you made my life suffering for over 4.5 years for the CDB. Would I vote for you now? Now, would my parents, if my parents were still alive, hell no, they would not vote for you.
Yeah,
would their parents vote for you? No. You see, there's over 6-7 million people. You see where this is going, and they wonder why the government's polling is going down the tubes. Now, does every other government want that to happen to them too? Because I tell you, you switch the Titanic chairs around.
Yeah.
All right. Is you going to fix the system, or is it? Well, then they'll say, well, you see what's happened to that government? They don't care. Okay. Work together so that you all care.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I want to thank everyone for tuning in today. I want to thank Dan especially for being on podcast.
2 seconds.
Okay.
2 seconds, Brent.
Yeah.
Dan,
In closing,
you get more. You get a minute.
In closing, the 3 most important things they need for this to be a success in the community is housing, money, and community-based services. Without those 3 things, you don't have dick all to make any of this a success. Earlier this year, we talked to Mike Schreiner back in March. Back in February, I talked to Merritt Stiles. I'm putting a direct ask and request out there to Doug Ford himself. Doug, come on the show. Come on the show and let's talk about these issues that affect all of us.
We'll be nice. We'll be nice.
And we'll treat you good, buddy.
Yeah.
We ask you for 15, 20 minutes of your time to just come on the show because you helped me in 1999 and you should help the other 12 million fucking people in Ontario right now.